So recently there was a popular trend on TikTok where women were asking their husbands and boyfriends how often they think about the Roman Empire, and they were shocked to find out that apparently men seem to think about the Roman Empire all the time. Now it's mostly just a comical and lighthearted thing, but it actually got me thinking, because as a man myself, I do often find myself thinking about ancient civilizations, and not necessarily just ancient Rome, but just important historical eras. Ancient Rome, Egypt, Greece. What started out as mostly a funny joke actually has some legitimate reasons behind it. So in today's video, I'll be answering the question, why are so many men so obsessed with the Roman Empire? And I've broken it down into the top 5 reasons. So let's start off with myths and legends. Human beings love great stories. Stories teach us lessons and concepts. They entertain us. They inspire us to be the best and to strive for greatness. And ancient Rome has a rich tradition of stories and myths that have endured over centuries. And as kids, we grew up learning about these epic stories. From the great pharaohs of ancient Egypt to the brave knights who rode into battle and slayed dragons. We learned important life lessons from the stories of ancient Greece and Rome. Like the story of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, a story about hubris and the arrogance of man, and something that's often referenced today. Or take the story of Mars and Venus, for example. This myth involves a love affair between Venus, the goddess of love, and Mars, the goddess of war. It explores the interplay between love and conflict, and it's often depicted in art and literature as the representation of the duality of human nature. And this story also gave rise to a very cliché quote that I'm sure we've all heard before, that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. There's also the story of the fall of Troy, and while this myth is not exclusive to Roman culture, it was adapted and incorporated into Roman literature and art. This is a timeless tale of deception, betrayal, and the consequences of human arrogance. Next, let's talk about the historical significance. The Roman Empire was one of the most powerful and influential civilizations in human history. It had a huge impact on a lot of important things in today's world, things like politics, law, engineering, and architecture, and a lot of other aspects of ancient Roman culture can still be seen today. Romans were renowned for their engineering prowess. They built an extensive network of roads, bridges, and buildings, many of which are still standing to this day. And the enduring architectural marvels of ancient Rome, such as the Colosseum and the Pantheon, they continue to inspire awe and inspiration. There's also the language. Latin, the language of the Romans, has had a profound and enduring influence on Western languages, particularly the Romance languages, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, as well as English. And the ancient Roman legal tradition forms the basis of the modern legal systems in many countries today. Concepts like the rule of law, legal equality, and contracts and the presumption of innocence. All of these concepts have ancient Roman origins. And on top of that, people are often drawn to the fantasy and the romantic aspects of influential periods in history. Think about immensely popular period dramas like Game of Thrones, Bridgerton, Downton Abbey, and the Gilded Age. Now we all know these shows are not about ancient Rome, and they're not even close to that same time period. But for some reason, we're drawn to what seems like this fascinating, magical, and whimsical era. We yearn for this time when things were supposedly so much better, even though oftentimes when you look at real history, you learn that things were quite different. Anyway, this actually brings me to my next 2 points, which are main character syndrome and pop culture. Okay, stay with me now. Everyone sees themselves as the hero in their own story, and we're all the main character in our own lives. And since we grow up learning about these epic stories of great men building vast empires, conquering their enemies, and just achieving greatness, this fantasy is very appealing to a lot of men in particular. It's very common for athletes to be compared to and seen as modern-day gladiators, and oftentimes in rough spots in life, we think about the bravery of ancient figures and heroes to draw some inspiration. A lot of men are drawn to the idea of being the big, tough guy, being the conqueror and the one who saves the day. So a man may be walking his dog, but he thinks of himself as Hercules, taming a wild beast. Or he might be sitting in his office job, about to go and negotiate a deal with a client, but in his mind, he's a gladiator walking into the arena to do battle. And just think about how much ancient Rome is embedded into popular culture. Think of all the quotes like "when in Rome." The full quote being, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do," which basically just means adapt your behavior and customs to fit the local culture and norms when you're in a foreign place. Or the quote "Carpe diem," meaning seize the day. Something I'm sure we've all seen posted on social media or tattooed on people's bodies. There's "Rome wasn't built in a day," which conveys the idea that significant achievements require time and patience. There are several more of these, but I think you get the point. We also have so many popular TV shows and movies about the Roman Empire. Movies like Gladiator, Spartacus, Ben-Hur, and all the various stories about Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. Then there's the cultural contributions. Roman literature, philosophy, art, and culture have left a lasting legacy. Works by authors like Cicero and Virgil continue to be studied and appreciated today. And people flock to that region of the world even now to go see the great art, to go see the paintings, the sculptures, and all of those things that still draw huge crowds. So people are still fascinated by this particular moment in history. And the number one reason why I think so many men often think about the Roman Empire boils down to one simple word, and that's masculinity. Now, while the term masculinity has had a pretty broad definition and it's something that's always changing, I think we all have an idea of what it means to be masculine. But in today's world, many men complain that masculinity is not only disappearing, but it's demonized and under attack. Historically, traditional gender roles often define men as the primary breadwinners and the protectors, while women were expected to be caregivers and homemakers. In modern society, these roles are shifting, with more women entering the workforce in increasing numbers, and men taking on a more caregiving and domestic role. This shift can create uncertainty and anxiety for some individuals who feel that traditional masculinity is being challenged. But how exactly does this refer to ancient Rome? We're all familiar with the word nostalgia, and now that we're living in a time where it seems like everything from the past is coming back, everything is a remake or a reboot, a sequel, or some kind of reimagining of something that was popular in the past. There's this sentimental longing or wishful affection for a period in the past, typically one's own earlier years or a historical time that people didn't even personally experience. It's a common human tendency to idealize the past, believing that things were better in the good old days. Our memories tend to focus on positive aspects and filter out the negative ones, and this selective memory bias can make the past seem rosier than it actually was. In today's economy, with the decline of manufacturing jobs, this has led to a big change in the type of employment opportunities available to men. And some argue that these changes have left men feeling disempowered and struggling to find their place in the workforce. And for a lot of men who are feeling displaced, disenfranchised, feeling sad, feeling isolated, like they've lost their purpose, it can be comforting to think back to this magical time in history, a time when so-called men were men, when we settled disputes with ritual combat and sword fights, where men were the heroes and they could take charge of their own destiny. We've talked about how the past is often romanticized, and it's definitely true for historical periods and locations such as ancient Greece and Rome. And nostalgia can act as a form of escapism from the challenges and complexities of modern life. It offers a comforting retreat to a familiar, idealized past. Trends and fashion from the past are frequently revisited and reimagined, reflecting a longing for bygone eras. And in ancient Rome, male social gatherings were an important aspect of Roman society. It was common for large groups of men to come together and discuss religion and politics. They get together for sporting events, particularly chariot races and gladiatorial contests. These gatherings took various forms and served different purposes, from political discussions to leisurely banquets. And modern technology and changes in social dynamics have led to a big concern about male isolation. The breakdown of traditional community structures and the rise of digital communication, these factors can also contribute to the feeling of loneliness, disconnection, and really just the isolation that's severely affecting men's mental health and well-being. So what's the general takeaway from this whole thing? Well, ancient Rome had a profound impact on today's politics, technology, philosophy, and culture, and it left an enduring legacy that continues to shape the way that we live our lives today. And a lot of men in particular are drawn to certain aspects like the politics, the military might, and the nostalgic desire for a perceived simpler time when our place in the world was more clear, when men were the heroes and they could stand up and beat their chests with pride. And while this definitely wasn't the romanticized image that we see in TV and movies, maybe that's something that just exists in our heads. But for a lot of men, the Roman Empire represents a greater desire, a desire to be the conqueror, a desire to be the author of your own story, and a big desire to achieve greatness. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit the like button if you did, and tell me down below, why do you think men are so drawn to the Roman Empire? Leave a comment, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe for more videos just like this one. And I'll see you very soon with another new episode of Daniel Speaks.